This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we push the boundaries with The Girl Next Door. When we try to transition from a life we don't want, the enemy shows up to remind us of our past. He is relentless and will never stop squeezing you. But Jesus came to show us the juice and how to handle the squeeze. The craziest thing you've ever done might be listening to this podcast, but just go with it and find God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and I will be flying solo once again this week, which is probably pretty good for what we're about to talk about. We're talking about The Girl Next Door, which came out in 2004. One of the questions in this movie is, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? Can't say this is even close to the craziest thing I've ever done, but it might be the craziest thing you've ever done to actually listen to this. So good luck with that. You probably would not expect to see this on a movie where we're talking about God or things of faith or anything like that. And some of you may be saying, why this movie? Normally, we try to give you a heads up if the language or the content is a little on the explicit side, on the adult side, on the questionable side. This one is for sure that if you are listening in the car or with your kids around, you don't want to do that. For the premise of this movie, I'm going to pull straight from Wikipedia for it. This movie is about a high school senior who falls in love for the first time with the girl next door, hence the title, but finds the situation becomes complicated after learning that she is a former porn star. So it's a film sort of in the sort of the American Pie genre that probably makes many people uncomfortable. So there's some ideas that I have that frame why we're talking about this movie. Or in general, even rated R movies or movies that might make you uncomfortable with the content that's in them. The first thing I was thinking was, our lives are rated R. If you actually look back at your life, I bet there's a bunch of rated R stuff. And that's stuff that we have to wrestle with. That's stuff that we're dealing with. I don't know about you. I like to sort of polish my past, frame it up, make it look nice, make it look presentable. But honestly, sometimes that's not the best way to handle it. That you put it away in a box, but when you put it away in a box, you don't really deal with some of the ramifications and repercussions of those decisions, of those events that have happened in your life or that are coming up. So our lives are not G or PG. So this is one of the reasons that I do sometimes pick movies that are a little on the, like I said, some content can make people uncomfortable. The second aspect of this concept is Jesus was frequently accused with hanging out with tax collectors and prostitutes. I'm not encouraging people to go do that. But what I'm saying is, Jesus sort of disrupted the religious groups of that day. He hung out with sinners. How dare you hang out with sinners? Those are people that I would imagine people were uncomfortable with. You know, the disciples were upset when Mary broke the bottle of perfume over Jesus' feet. They were uncomfortable with that. They were uncomfortable hanging out with people that were unclean. Jesus touched lepers. And what Jesus did was he took the unclean and made it clean. When he touched it, he didn't become unclean, but what was unclean became clean. And so what I want to do is take this movie that I think has some really good content, some good ideas, some good concepts, and dig into that and redeem it and say, yeah, you can enjoy this movie. And here's why, here's what you can see, here's where the parables are. And I was talking with a friend of mine today, and he mentioned the idea of the Revolutionary War. And how the English at that time they were the biggest army. They were the world superpower back in the 1700s. And they had this very regimented, very structured way of fighting. And if the colonies, if the Americans had fought the way that the English fought, America wouldn't exist. We'd still be part of the Great Britain. We'd still sing God Save the Queen and all that. And I think that we need to engage in our battle for our hearts. We have to fight almost like a guerrilla warfare. We have to learn to engage with the culture and with the enemy and with our faith in some ways that might be uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable for the colonies to fight sort of a guerrilla warfare out of the woods, to not line up and just shoot each other back and forth. But if we insist on fighting one certain way, then we're going to lose. We have to learn to fight in a variety of ways. And one of the ways that I fight is to look at these movies and say, wow, this movie, there's parts of this movie I really enjoy that really stick out to me. What is it? Why is it? To investigate and examine it and say, yeah, this is why this matters. This is what we can learn from this movie. And I think that The Girl Next Door is a lot about, we're going to see the desire to leave the past behind, to transform ourselves, and take a look at the enemy and how we can fight, how the enemy comes against us. And in the character of Kelly, played by Timothy Oliphant. And so these are the reasons, these are sort of what I'm engaging in as I take on a more challenging movie. And so this is where I'm inviting you. If you're like, whoa, this is not my cup of tea, there's going to be penis jokes and a lot of sort of sexual content in the conversation, because I think it's just an easy sort of foil. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. If you're uncomfortable, that's fine. But if you want to engage in something, if you want to push the boundaries of what's comfortable and what's real, and maybe the language is a little rough or the content is a little rough. But I think what it is why does that bother you? What are you wrestling with? And how can we engage that in a world around us that is very similar? So if this movie or these ideas make you a little uncomfortable, go ahead and, skip it, delete it off your phone or whatever. But I just wanted to sort of be upfront and honest about what's coming next and what we're going to be talking about and how we're going to be dealing with it. Because I think that we can take something like this that you would look at and say, you shouldn't be talking about this movie. And I'll say, no, I enjoyed this movie. My wife and I enjoyed watching it. And I think that there's value even in this. Because the challenge is to find value. Where can we find value? Where can we find truth? And where can we find some direction to guide our lives, even in a culture that repeatedly tells us not to do it this way? So let's dive right in. So if you haven't seen the movie, and I think what I enjoy about the movie is it's set up similar to what you'd think as a rom-com, obviously with the twist of the past in the porn industry, the adult film industry. And from my time, working and engaging with men over the last several years, I know the pervasiveness that porn has, even through men in the church. We did a straw poll at one of our retreats. And from what they said, about 75% of the men there, and these are men who are actually seeking a deeper walk with Christ, about 75% of the men had looked at porn in the last month. And it has become a pervasive thing. But I think in this movie, it's a good tool. You've got Danielle, who's played by Elisha Cuthbert, and she moves in. She's house sitting for her aunt, but she's got a history in film, in adult film, and she was a porn star, right? And I think as a tool, I'm not sure that you could come up with a better former job. Like, what bigger issue, what mistake could she make that would be more devastating to future relationships? that would be more challenging, that what she wanted, at a past that she wants to escape. I think that if you look at it in that way, as sort of diving into the sexual content as just an indicator of this is a pretty easy, uncomfortable spot, as they'll talk about in one of the clips about Matt, who's played by Emile Hirsch. He needs to find a girl who will push his boundaries. And she does that all throughout this movie. So the movie opens with, it's a typical high school memories. Remember this, I'll remember this. And it takes you back to your hopefully not your glory days back as a senior in high school. But you've got Matthew, who's made no memories. When he's asked to what was your favorite memory, and he's sort of drawing a blank. And he's gotten into Georgetown. He's really, I think, really good in math, and he's really smart. He's a class president. He's raised money for this kid in Cambodia to bring him to the U.S. so he can receive a higher education that he wouldn't have gotten in Cambodia, in this little village. And what this shows is this young man who's getting to college, or about to transition to college, about to graduate, about to go to prom. And he looks back on his time there with some questions. And when I did my podcast with Brendan, my son, back before he went to East Carolina, one of the things that he said he wanted to do was figure out who he was. He wanted to discover who he was. And that's what you see with Matthew in this movie, of what really matters, because so much of what he's done has been either told to him, or this is what I should do, or following the rules, not wanting to get in trouble. And those aren't necessarily bad things. But what it creates is pretty boring life. And you could argue some of the details where, Roger Ebert gave this movie like 1.5 stars. So we're not going to parse down the storytelling content. We're not, or any of that. We're going to talk on the more focus on the big pictures here. So we see Matthew, he's struggling with what happened over the last 4 years. It's a very mid-age crisis. He's looking back and saying, was the last 4 years, did I make memories? Was it worth it? And then looking ahead of saying this, I have to do this. For him, it was get into Georgetown and then get this scholarship so he can actually go to Georgetown. But along the way, he sort of loses track of who he is, of what matters. And it's interesting, I think, the contrast, because here he is going for this moral fiber scholarship. And here are the things in the movie that probably would not be considered to have a high degree of moral fiber. Early on, he watches Danielle undress across their neighbors. So he just stares through his window. And then for her revenge, as punishment, as payback, she makes him get out of the car later and take his clothes off, after which she drives off, because that's how it works. Later on, he skips school. He skinny dips in the principal's pool when he discovers Danielle is a former adult film actress, and they sort of have issues. They get in an argument. She goes back to Vegas with Kelly, who's sort of the pimp director, filmmaker-ish guy. And he goes to an adult film convention to chase after her. He ends up taking ecstasy. He doesn't know it, but he still took ecstasy. He lies to his parents. He lies to the bank teller. He ended up breaking into Hugo Posh's house, who's the sort of rival porn film director for Kelly, and steals a giant penis statuette that's supposed to be like the adult film Oscars. And when you list it out this way, Matthew doesn't seem like a very likable character. But what he is he's naive. And when you don't know what you are, when you don't know who you are, when you don't know what's most important to you, You end up getting blown around by the winds of what's happening. So you've got a guy, he's searching, like many of us are, searching for who he is, what he wants to do, what he stands for. And so Danielle, they go out to dinner and she calls him on it. She says, well, what are you doing? Are you stoked for graduations coming up? You must just be going crazy. She sees the truth in him.
Yeah. I mean, it's just been off the hook, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
So what's the craziest thing you've done lately?
Oh, I mean, it's hard to tell, you know, because I've just done so much nuts stuff. I mean, it's just off the hook, off the walls. I mean,
You haven't done anything, have you?
no. It's kind of been my problem lately.
Come on, there's gotta be something. What about your girlfriend? Okay. We can figure this out. You need a girl. What kind of girl? Definitely someone cute.
Definitely.
Someone who can make him laugh. But he also needs someone who's gonna push him. Someone who's gonna make him do things he never thought he could do.
Like stripping in the middle of the street.
Yeah, because what guy doesn't want a girl that makes him get naked in the headlights of her Volkswagen Bug? And so you see this, he's searching for who he is. And she offers sort of this guidance and push the envelope. And we do need our boundaries pushed from time to time. We need our boundaries pushed so we know where they are. You know, like we talked about, I've talked about with Brendan of you're going to be doing some stuff, you know, even going to football games at East Carolina. Like you're going to figure out which group you are. You might one day go sort of dressed up with the bow ties and the nice shirt and be in that group. Or you might go and be the take your shirt off and paint your chest purple guys. And sometimes you just have to try things out. And he was going for a fraternity. I think the idea of being in the brotherhood, having brothers there with him really appealed to him. But he was going through it. He's like, I don't know. We actually had a conversation one night and he said, I don't know who I'm becoming. I don't like who I'm becoming as they're drinking and doing some other stuff. And he's like, I feel pressured to perform to make them approve of me. So he ended up backing out. He's like, no, that's not who I want to be. That's not the direction I want to go. And he ended up going with a different fraternity because, again, he enjoys the brotherhood, but they weren't hazing. They're a little bit different. They're a wide variety of students. Like the other frat was just all business guys. And this one is more sort of professional. Not that there's anything wrong with a business degree, but it's more guys that know where they want to go with their lives. And Brendan wants to be a physical therapist, so he fits in with that crowd a little better. And they've gone camping and they've got a beach trip coming up. And so he's like, oh no, I'm not that, but maybe this. And so that's what you see in Matthew is it's like, I don't like who I've been. I don't like the fact that I look back and don't have any crazy memories. I don't have an answer for what's the craziest thing you've done. And I think we get to these ages in our 30s and 40s where we look back and say, what has my life been? What has my impact been? Have I done anything crazy? Have I done anything memorable? Or what am I going to be remembered for? I was talking to somebody the other day and I talk to him I wish I talked to him more often, but it's turned out to be about every couple of months. He's like, every time I talk to you, you're getting ready to go somewhere. Because last time I was getting ready to go to Spain, and the time before that it was Colorado, I think. Or he's like, you're always planning on going somewhere. And he's like, well, let's get lunch next week. I was like, I can't. I'm going to the beach because I'm taking the kids to the beach. But what I did at the end of last year, I went through this journaling process for about a week to say, what's most important to me? Who is it that I want to be? What is it that I want to do? And how does who I am match up with what I'm doing? And one of the things that came up was a vacation with my family. And I don't mean like my parents and my brother, because I've done that many times, but it was, I want to go on a trip as the kids get older. You know, my daughter's almost 21. And she, but she's got a 2.5-year-old son, and Andrew's getting ready to start his junior year of high school next fall. And those times are getting short, but I was like, I want to do a vacation where the kids are there. And so we're doing that over Andrew's spring break. We're going to go, and my daughter's going to join us. Brendan's going to drive down for a day or two from East Carolina. And so we got a place big enough for all of us. Because it would have been easy to just get like a 2-bedroom place for Steph and I, and then Andrew to go with us. But I was like, no, I want more than that. And so the cost is there. And so I had that established at the beginning of the year. This is something I want to do. So now how can we make that happen? But there's a problem when we look back and we say, and really Danielle is doing the same thing, because she wanted to leave her past behind her. She was a porn star, right? And she left LA because she wanted to not do that anymore. But what happens when we try to transition away from who we were, from the identity that we had been using, it gets discovered. It comes back to bite us. And so she's trying to escape her past, but it comes up. And Eli, who's Matthew's friend, discovers, she's like, when they meet, he's like, I know who she is. And she shows Matthew a video of one of her films. And it changes him. He goes differently. Eli gives him some horrible advice of treat her like a porn star. And she goes with it. She knows something's happened. She's like, you're acting different. You're acting weird. You're not acting like you had been acting during the earlier stages of our courtship, which, I mean, the movie takes place in like a week. And so they end up in this cheap hotel room, and she starts playing the part. She's being very seductive, and it's making him uncomfortable as he sees her embrace her old identity. He gets uncomfortable with it.
How do you want me?
Why are you doing this?
What?
This.
Isn't this what you want? To fuck a porn star in a cheap motel room? So this is what you think of me?
Danielle, wait, I'm sorry.
Let me guess, someone showed you a tape and you thought, what the hell, she does it for a living, right?
Eli told me to do it.
Oh, now that's a mature response.
Why didn't you just tell me?
Because I didn't want to, okay? Because I love the way you looked at me. God, do you have any idea how...
Hold on.
Fuck you!
And you see it, that I loved the way you looked at me. And he's struggling with, why are you doing this? And why would she, like, that's just a stupid question. Why didn't you tell me? Well, why would anybody tell you, yeah, this is my worst mistake. This is my biggest regret. This is the life I'm trying to leave behind. That's not who she wants to be defined by. And when he begins defining her by it, it breaks her. It breaks her heart. She's shattered, in Isaiah 61, where it talks about Jesus and the Lord's anointed comes to bind up the brokenhearted. The term for brokenhearted is like the word is, it conveys a picture of a vase that's dropped to the floor and shattered into a million pieces. And so our old lives have a tendency to do that. Who we were breaks us. And that's what you see and the purpose of the breaking is for transformation. Because if we're not broken, we don't need a healer, right? We're not broken, we don't need repair. We don't need restoration. So we have to be broken in order for restoration and transformation to occur. Because and it doesn't matter if you're Danielle or Matthew in this story, the old life doesn't work. It's not going to work it hasn't worked. It's just been a way that we've made it kind of cobbled through, survived, struggled. As I talked about with Castaway, it's like, okay, I'm tired of fish and coconuts. Yeah, I've survived, but it's not much of a life. And that's what you see with both of them is I've survived, but it's not much of a life. I don't want that life anymore. But you'll have an enemy. In this case, Kelly, played by Timothy Oliphant, who comes in and I don't know if he shows up or she calls him because she's like, obviously this is all I am. This is all I'll ever be. Because when one morning Matthew comes out and sees them packing the car, he's like, what's going on? The challenge for us is when we look at other people is to see who they are and could be, not who they were at their worst moments. And conversely, we have to do that to ourselves as well. And that's one of the hardest things I've had to do is to not view myself as a big screw up, as a guy who's had a divorce, as a guy who's sees his kids half the time at best. The default is you're a failure as a father because they're not with you every night. And nothing I do can ever sort of jump that bar. And so sometimes talking to ourselves, not allowing our conversation to ourselves condemn us, because what happens in this situation is Matthew sees her as a porn star. And so she changes what she believes about herself.
Where are you guys going?
Vegas, baby. We got the convention. Gotta press the flesh, meet the fans.
So that's it? You just going back?
I don't belong here.
What do you mean? What about starting over?
This is what I am.
This is what I am. And in our moments, in our crisis, and that's where the enemy shows up. He's like, that's who you are. I'll welcome you back with open arms. You know, Kelly's a great guy in the beginning. Give Max cigars, orders him a drink, really welcomes him into the world. Because that's who the enemy is. He wants us to follow along, to do what he wants us to do. He doesn't want us to fight him. Oh, yeah, that's who you are. You're a guy who's addicted to porn. You shouldn't even be listening to this podcast. Paul, you shouldn't even be doing this podcast. This is a terrible movie for guys to watch. But you discover through this stuff, you discover what's important. And so they go to Vegas. And Matthew has a decision. Do I let her go? Oh, this was awesome, but it's over now. Or does he chase her? So, of course, you know, this being the movie, he chases her. He takes his friends to the adult film convention there in Vegas, and they go in and there's porn stuff everywhere. And it's just interesting as the movie goes along, going back to that question, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? Each day, each moment is almost like he's saying again, this is right up there. This is right up there. Like, yeah, that was crazy. This is a little crazier, you know, ditching school, lying to our folks, going to chase the girl in Vegas. This is up there. But restoration of your heart doesn't happen sitting around staring at your belly button. You actually do have to engage in some crazy things. Sometimes those crazy things are like my friend Dan leaving Indiana and coming down to Charlotte to start a home building company in 2008. That was a bad time to make that transition. But he did it because he was following God. It might be, oh, I'm leaving this job so I'm saying no to working so I can say yes to my kids and my wife and the family and the impact on what I can do small scale. And I don't know what the craziest thing would look like for you. Sometimes it might be saying no to things. Sometimes it might be saying yes to things. And you've got to walk with God in that. But he chases her to Vegas. He finds her. And what is a really funny scene, you've got these guys who are big fans of Danielle, which is really kind of creepy and gross. But it's sort of like a comic convention, but, with porn instead. And so he fights through the crowd because Matthew has a message to say to her that he's like, because he realized he doesn't see her as a porn star. He sees her as the girl next door. He sees her as a woman, as a girl who surprises him, as a girl who pushes him to become who, accepts him for who he is. And so he engages in this sort of a mini monologue that pisses off everyone around him.
Look, I'm sorry. I had to come.
Asshole, I'm next.
I feel like this is all my fault.
Who is this guy?
Will you at least look at me? You're the best thing that ever happened to me, okay?
Me too!
Aww, he's so sweet.
Danielle.
Nice job, dickwad.
So she leaves the stage, but in that moment, you see he's having to fight the crowd. He's like, I'm next. They're telling her what to do. They're trying to be fanboys, but he grabs her attention by saying, you're the best thing that ever happened to me, because the truth will grab our attention. And the truth makes the current situation unlivable. She can't stand it. When she hears that, even the other girls on stage are like, oh, how sweet. And she has to leave. She has to get off the stage. She's like, I can't they're incongruent. They don't work together. And so she leaves. And what you see is as he pursues her heart, and as she understands who she could be, this pisses off Kelly, right? Because he's the guy. He's the enemy in this situation. He wants her to make him money. And so what you see is as you pursue this, as you fight for it, as you fight for your heart, as you fight for the heart of those around you, the enemy starts popping in, and he's like, oh, I was fine when we were going in the same direction. When you were letting me do what I wanted to do, that was great. But now you're starting to mess with my business. And we see the real Kelly show up here.
What's up?
It's not cute anymore.
What?
Stop filling her head with that. Do not piss me off!
Hey, I thought we were friends.
Friends don't fuck with each other's business. And that's what this is. My fucking business. What? What are you gonna do? Yeah, that's what I thought. Stay the fuck away from her.
What are you going to do? That's what the enemy says to you. What are you going to do? He's going to bow up, right? He pushes him into the shelf, and what are you going to do? Because it's not going to come easy. My Dan who came down here, he moved down, started a company, and then 2008, 2010 happened, which the housing crash. The enemies, what are you going to do? You followed God, and this is what's happening. What are you going to do? You decided to start tithing, and then the car broke down. What are you going to do? You took this new job, and it's harder than you thought it was going to be. What are you going to do? You started trying to read your Bible. Now you're a week behind. What are you going to do? You started pursuing a bigger life, a better life. You started to pursue a deeper walk with God. What are you going to do? Once again, Matthew has another decision point. And we have decision points. What are you going to do? And he goes up to her, and because in that first scene where she was describing the girl, she was actually drawing a picture. And so he walks up to her, and all he says is, "I know who you are," and he gives her the picture to remind her of who she is. And that was enough to pull her back. I know who you are. We are not the worst moments in our life. We are not our biggest regrets. I mean, you can look through the Bible, and you're a royal priesthood. You're a chosen nation. You are a holy people. You are saints. You are a masterpiece. The Bible is God saying, this is who you are. As we talked about, with Arrival, of the importance of communication and explaining who you are. Who am I? Who are you? You got to start with the basics. You got to start simple. And it starts with who am I? And it starts with who are you? And we have to understand that. And then obviously the third one in there is the enemy. Who is that? Who is that guy? Because it's important to know who Kelly is. I thought we were friends. No, I'm just manipulating and using everyone around me. No, I'm just trying to coerce and get what I want. I want more money. I want to be a big star. You know, he's got the competition with Hugo Posh because Hugo stole Kelly's idea, according to Kelly. And so it's important to know who the enemy is. And even in those moments, even at 2:00 at night, if you're looking at porn while your wife's upstairs, God's saying, I know who you are and you're better than this. As C.S. Lewis we keep referencing this quote from C.S. Lewis of, God keeps inviting us to a vacation, a holiday at the beach, but we're happy playing in mud puddles, thinking that's a good life, thinking that's fun. So what mud puddles are you playing in? Where God's saying, I know who you are and you're better than this. And again, the enemy is going to attack it because Danielle comes back. And Kelly is no longer hiding. He's no longer trying to be the nice guy. He's like, Danielle didn't show up. Like, if she's going to, I don't care what she wants. I need her to make money by having sex with other people. And she's getting in my way and I need to fix it. So he busts in, kidnaps Matthew from school, beats up some guys who are sitting on his car, and they're in the car. And you see Matthew's naivety. It's like, oh, she cost me I lost $30,000 because she didn't show up this morning. Kelly says this. And Matthew's like, well, she'll get a job. I keep mowing lawns. It shows, and that's the other part throughout this whole movie, is Matthew's naivety when it comes to facing the world. He doesn't understand how the world works. And it's probably one of the reasons I like this movie, because at that age, I was very much the same way. I didn't understand. I was homeschooled. I went to a Christian school. My parents protected me from a lot of the stuff that goes on in the world. And when you discover it, you're kind of like a deer in the headlights. Or the earlier scene in the movie, you feel kind of naked in the headlights of the Volkswagen Beetle. So this next clip is Kelly in the car. And really, it's all about the last, really, the line of, if you're going to do this, if you're going to pursue this, if you're going to pursue a life of freedom life of transformation, you better know what it's going to take.
Where are we going?
I thought you were cool, man. I tried to be your friend, and what do? You fucked me.
I didn't fuck you.
She didn't show up on set today because of what you said. Now I'm out 30 grand. Guess who's paying me back?
What? I don't have 30 grand.
Get your folks to help you out.
They don't have that kind of money. Look, Kelly, I'm a problem solver, all right? This is what I do. Okay? Let's just think outside of the box here. Look, she'll get a job, I'll keep mowing lawns, and over time we'll pay it down. You know, this can work. When we can do this, it'll be like a payment plan.
You really care about her, huh?
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, I don't know. If I'm gonna do this payment plan thing, I need a show of good faith, you know? Something concrete.
Well, like what?
A blowjob.
Nah, I told you she's not gonna do that anymore.
Who said anything about her? Yeah, we're definitely outside the box now, huh? Now you gotta ask yourself, how far are you willing to go? How much do you really care about her? I'm joking, man. Relax. Damn. Do I look gay to you?
No, but Jesus.
You want to be president? Let me tell you the first rule of politics. Always know if the juice is worth the squeeze. You know what that means? It means you don't steal my girl unless you're ready to accept the consequences.
And in Luke 14, Jesus talks about this. A large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, "If you want to be my disciple, you must by comparison hate everyone else, your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters. Yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, 'There's the person who started the building and couldn't afford to finish it.' Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own." You've got to know, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is what you're going to get out of it worth the cost? And then you have to say, what's the cost? What's the value? And that's not necessarily, it's not a strictly monetary pros and cons way of looking at it. But it's what Jesus did. In Hebrews 12, because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. He counted the cost. He knew what it would cost him, but he did it anyway. And so what is the juice? Where is the squeeze? And there's so many parables that Jesus talks about of the value of the kingdom of heaven. You know, it talks about the pearl of great price, where this man found a pearl, went out, sold everything he owned to buy the pearl, found a treasure in the field. And he went out and sold everything to buy the field because of the value of the treasure that's in it. And when you find that treasure, when you find that life, when you find that peace and joy and wisdom, it is worth everything. He's not saying we have to hate our parents or family. But in comparison, And so the idea of how do we fall in love with Jesus? How do we love Jesus and God? And he says, if you do not carry your own cross, there's going to be a squeeze. Where he says, in this life, you will have trouble. The squeeze is coming. But take heart. I have overcome the world. But the juice is worth it. And that's really what Matthew finds out through this movie. We're about to get to the big speech. Kelly, at this point, gives him ecstasy instead of aspirin for the beating he just gave him. He sets him up to get arrested. He's like, oh no, here's the collateral. We're going to go in. This award, this adult film Oscar award should have been mine. We're going to go steal it. It's just a setup. And by the way, the enemy works that way. He sets us up to fail, because he doesn't care. Like, it was funny when he was getting kidnapped. Matthew tells Kelly, I don't know where we're going, but I've got this really important scholarship dinner at 6:00. So we just need to be back by then. And Kelly doesn't give a shit about that. The enemy doesn't give a shit about what's important to you. And if he does, it's just so that he can take it away. So here's Matthew. He's late for his dinner. He's high on ecstasy. He looks a wreck. And so he gets up there, and the guy before him steals sort of his big JFK quote. And so he goes off the script. He's like, I've been preparing the speech for weeks, and what I've been doing isn't working. The life I've lived isn't working anymore, but here is what I've found out.
You know, it's funny. I have this whole speech prepared, and I've been practicing for weeks, but you know what? I'm just gonna go with it. Moral fiber. So, what is moral fiber? I mean, it's funny. I used to think it was always telling the truth, doing good deeds, you know, basically being a fucking Boy Scout. But lately I've been seeing it differently. Now I think that moral fiber is about finding that one thing you really care about. That one special thing that means more to you than anything else in the world. And when you find her, you fight for her. You risk it all. You put her in front of everything. Your future, your life, all of it. And maybe the stuff you do to help her isn't so clean. You know what? It doesn't matter. Because in your heart, you know that the juice is worth the squeeze. That's what moral fiber is all about.
That concept's probably why I love this movie so much. The idea that the juice is worth the squeeze, or making sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, because the squeeze will come, right? Your life has been squeezed. Your life is probably being squeezed. You know, when I got the phone call from my daughter saying that she was pregnant, that was a squeeze. When I was called into my boss's office to say, I don't think it's working out. I think you need to find another job. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. That's a squeeze. And what do you do with the squeeze? What do we do when we're squeezed? Do we say, God doesn't love me? When the car blows up? When we get in an argument with our wife again? When we get when we get fired again, blindsided? When we can't find a job? What do we do with the squeeze? And what he says, you got to keep an eye on the juice, right? That's what Jesus did. You keep an eye on the joy set before him. And it's not like this high pie in the sky. Well, everything will be good once I'm dead and in heaven. No, our eternal life has already begun. The fruit of the Spirit already is starting. It's not, I've got to live in misery. I mean, does Paul sound miserable when he's writing from jail? No, he says, Now that I know what it's like to be full, I know what it is like to be hungry, I know what it's like to be cold, I know what it's like to be warm. And really, those things don't matter. The squeeze doesn't matter because I've learned to be content and I can do anything through Christ. And the squeeze can squeeze, right? I was just talking with some of my friends last night and this guy lost his son, his 21-year-old son. And that's a squeeze. I mean, that's a squeeze no one wants. And he said, I want to call him, but I don't know what to say because words are inadequate. And there's sometimes a squeeze, you just don't know what to say. There's a time to be reminded of the joy. There's a time to just say, hey, some of the joy, some of the juice is just, I'm here with you, man. You're not by yourself walking through this. When you're squeezed, I'm squeezed. And let's get squeezed together, right? And so he makes this big speech at they give him a standing ovation, but he doesn't get the scholarship, which, considering the list of things that we discussed earlier, that's probably about right. I'm not sure moral fiber was really what his strong point was. But the other part that I really loved was we talked about, I thought that moral fiber was this. It's just turning into a Boy Scout. We think that's what it means to be a Christian, is to be really nice. We don't talk about movies like The Girl Next Door. We don't watch movies like The Girl Next Door. I actually had a teacher in high school. I went to this very conservative Christian high school in South Carolina, and he bragged about not going to the movies for like 30 years because that's what matters. It's funny with some of the bourbon clubs that I'm been involved with online. What you'll see is the guys will find some special bourbon that's hard to find, and they'll go out in their car and they'll put it down in their lap and take a picture of it. But I was like, all they're doing is they're taking a picture of their bourbon dick. Look how big my bourbon dick is. And this guy who is in high school is like, look how big my church dick is. Look what a faithful follower I am. But when we do that, we're missing the point. Moral fiber isn't about being a Mr. Rogers. It's about getting our hearts back. It's about pursuing a walk with God. It's about what Jesus said. How is that going to be considered a good thing, a nice guy? You must hate, by comparison, everyone else. If you don't hate everyone else, you can't be my disciple. If you don't carry your own cross, you can't be my disciple. If you can't lay down your life, you can't be my disciple. And it's not being a doormat. Jesus was not a doormat. You don't crucify a doormat. You crucify somebody who's a catalyst for change. You crucify someone who's disrupting the world. You crucify someone who's transforming lives. And how does he do that? By engaging with people. By telling stories. By saying, this is the value. This is the kingdom of heaven. The juice. Look at the juice. You're going to get squeezed whether or not you're chasing the juice. But it's worth it. You got to count the cost. You got to know it's coming so that when it does come, you're not shocked. Oh man, I thought following Jesus meant my kids behaved, my wife would submit and do whatever I said, that everything would go smoothly. It's up and to the right. Glory upon glory. And it's all on how you measure it. What juice are you measuring? Because the juice isn't your external stuff. The juice is internal. The juice is in your heart. But the enemy doesn't give up. Because after that, like I said, he doesn't get the scholarship. Then he shows up to get this kid from Cambodia, and Kelly's stolen the money. And so Matthew Now he's not just not got the scholarship. Now he's facing expulsion. He's facing jail. And so they come up with this big idea to basically they shoot a updated current sex education film instead of the one that's from the 70s. They shoot a more current version of it that might actually capture people's attention. But everybody thinks the way that the film is shot makes you think they're shooting a porno on school grounds, but it's sex education. So Kelly once again shows up with the tape because Eli's called, I don't know where the tape is. Because the enemy is relentless. Where do you think the squeeze comes from? And he shows up once again and he's holding on to the tape. And I just think that what he says is just such a good image of what the enemy will tell us.
So how was prom?
That's mine.
You know, we were fine, but now you go and do this? This was my idea. Now I'm really gonna fuck your shit up.
I'm gonna need that back.
Oh. Take it from me. Yeah. What are you gonna do?
I don't have to do anything. Hugo Posh will. Yeah, he's my partner on this 50-50. So, could I please have my tape back?
Fuck you! Fuck you. I'm taking your half then.
No, that money's going to Sam Young. The money you stole from him.
You say that like I care. I don't give a shit. You're giving me your half.
And if I don't?
Showtime.
Okay.
Okay, what?
Show him the tape.
I'm not fucking around.
I just don't care anymore.
This is gonna be interesting.
And you see that of, hey, you stole the money from Sam Yang for the Cambodian kid to come over. He's like, you mistake me for somebody who gives a damn. I literally don't give a shit. Because that's how the enemy is. You took my kid. I don't care. You cost me my job. I don't care. You cost me my marriage. Don't care. If you look in Revelation, he fucking hates you. He will spend his entire energy and his forces, tens of millions of fallen angels, to take you out. And I don't mean take you out as like where Matthew says, I don't care. Go ahead, show him the tape. Because that's sort of, he's like, I actually have nothing to hide. Because when you live a life with moral integrity, with moral fiber, you have nothing to hide. He really doesn't have anything to hide. He's just more concerned of how it's going to come across, what his parents are going to respond, how they're going to respond to the work that he did. But is he worried about being exposed? No, because the whole purpose of making a tape was to share it. He was like, fine, it's going to come out anyway. And you see him, how was prom? He comes across as a friend. But then he will lure you in. Church is pointless. You don't need to go. It's just, an hour, 2 hours on Sunday. You could be playing golf. You could be taking a nap. You could be working in the yard. You got stuff to do. You're a busy man. You could drink another beer. It's not going to hurt. Those donuts, your wife doesn't need to know about those donuts. All he wants to do is steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to devour you. He does not care about what is important to you. And if it does, it's because he wants to take it away. He wants to take away your heart. He wants to take away the heart of your family, the heart of those closest to you. He will come after them. And he is relentless. And we have a partner. A little bit bigger guy than Hugo Posh. I was talking to my dad a couple of weeks ago because he was going to pray at church and he was worried about it. And he's like, yeah, I've got this prayer list, pray for this guy who's sick or pray for our missionaries and all this. And it's like, prayers aren't grocery lists to God of what we want. It's not a wish list. It's not, hey, it's my birthday's coming up. Here's my list of things I'd like. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And then I'm giving it to you. So when we are in submission to Christ, when we are his disciple, when we say, nope, I'm giving you my life, his authority is bestowed on us. And when I told my dad, I was like, when you pray, you are invoking the authority and the kingdom of God over the people because he's an elder. He's a leader in the church. So they have submitted to his authority. So it's like a waterfall. Jesus has been given all authority. Jesus gives that authority to those who are in submission to him. And if those people are in submission to you, then you exercise Jesus' authority. And I don't mean like ruling over them with an iron fist sort of authority. I mean invoking the kingdom of God. Like demons get back type of authority. Like you can't hurt me. Yes, you can squeeze me. We are squeezed but not crushed. It's what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. Our self must die so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested. So death is at work in us, but life in you. We are squeezed, but we are not crushed. We're not driven to despair. We are not forsaken, because that's what the enemy wants us to do, is to believe that we are forsaken, to despair, to give up. We're called to stand strong. We do not lose heart. Our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, temporary. But the things that are unseen are eternal. So as we wrap up this unconventional movie, who would have thought I'd be quoting 2 Corinthians 4 here at the end of a discussion on the girl next door? But where is your heart set? Where are your eyes set? That's what's it. Fix your eyes on Jesus, who looked to the joy set before him. How do you not lose heart? You've got to renew your strength day by day. Your inner strength is renewed. And the squeezing is preparing us for the weight of glory. As we look not to this life, or not to the things that can be seen, the things that are external, we look to the things that are internal. Because the things that are internal will last forever. So this has been Paul McDonald talking about The Girl Next Door. I hope you live a life where you can say, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? And you're like, man, I'm about to do it. Because the life with Christ is crazy. It is crazy to have peace in the strife, to have joy when other people would despair. That is crazy. So be crazy and just remember and dwell on the fact that the juice is worth the squeeze. And I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?